Hello and welcome to World Insight with Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been grilled in the parliament for suspicions of cronyism. Can Abe survive this scandal that has already hurt his party's grip on the local elections? And I speak to Melinda Gates about the giving pledge by the world's billionaires. We also discuss how the Gates Foundation select partners from around the world. And we start in Japan, where Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been grilled in Parliament over an alleged education scandal. Abe and his aides were accused of intervening to help his friend to win approval for building a school in a special economic zone in Japan. Abe repeatedly denied the charge, but the scandal has demonstrably impacted his political career.
A stern test for Shinzo Abe. With his aides and himself denying charges of favoritism, his support rate has dropped below 30%, the lowest since he took office in 2012.
Though the opposition party wanted to hold the relevant officials accountable for this, some officials said the documents are gone, and some argued that they don't remember it and there is no record. They are just finding excuses rather than seriously answering questions.
We should ask the chairman of the Kage Educational Institution to be questioned. There ought to be some clarity about the reason for selecting this school to open a new veterinary department. Prime Minister Abe did not explain it clearly and just said he had no connection to it.
The Kage Educational Institute, whose director is a close friend to Abe, is said to have received land for construction of a school worth about $30 million for free. In January 2017, Japanese government gave a go-ahead for Kage Educational Institute to set up a veterinary school in the strategic economic zone. In March, details of the deal revealed that the land, worth over 3 billion yen, was offered to the school for free. Moreover, they were guaranteed a 9.6 billion yen subsidy in construction cost. And in May, the former education minister alleged that the cabinet office distorted administrative process. In June, the Japanese Education Ministry found files supporting suspicions that Shinzo Abe unfairly influenced the Kage school project. And later, new documents revealed that Abe had set a deadline for the opening of the school. Abe's denial did not convince the public. An opposition-backed candidate on Sunday won a mayoral election for the northern city of Sendai. That follows this month's historic defeat for the ruling Liberal Democratic Party in elections for the Tokyo Assembly. Next month, there will be a cabinet reshuffle, which Abe is relying on to fix his public support. But whether it will work remains a question.
So could Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe really recover from the shrinking rating and restive parliament? Let's ask our panelists joining us here in the Beijing studio, Yang Xiyu, who is a senior fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir, to our program. Meanwhile, joining us in Hong Kong, originally from Japan, we have Yuichi Shimatsu, who is a former editor of Japan Times. Welcome, sir. I want to begin with you, Mr. Shimatsu. Why now we see this crisis of credibility, seems, for the Prime Minister Abe, boiling every day ever more?
Well, this involves not just cronyism based on very right-wing politics, and his relationship with this man Kotaro Kake, who runs several schools, and this project is under the Okayama Science University, and which is on the other side of the inland sea. And this is part of a regional development plan. And regional development in Japan is supposed to mean bringing the economy out of the recession. This is a total giveaway to people who already have money and don't need the money. So already people are very angry about that. But there's other aspects too. Shinzo Abe 13 years ago worked with Mr. Kake, got money from him to lobby the Koizumi government to put in this veterinary school. So I think everyone in the country, certainly everyone in the political establishment, realizes he's just outright lying to save his neck right now. So he's really walking the plank right now and facing the sharks.
But you know, Mr. Yang, this is a veterinary school. I mean, and yet you see this is putting the Prime Minister almost on the edge of his political career in a way.
Oh, yes.
How should we understand this very different contrast?
Well, I think this individual incidents really linked with the fundamental political troubled basis for Abe. Say, without this, before this scandal broke out, there have been accumulated disappointment and dissatisfaction against the prime minister. So this scandal event actually play a role as a trigger for spreading the disappointments and the dissatisfaction and angers at the current policies conducted by Abe.
If we're talking about Mr. Abe and his political career, we might want to see how many people are still supporting him. The ratings is one of the things that we can look at. Mr. Abe found his ratings, in fact, nosedive after the scandal over suspected cronyism broke. We look at the July the 22nd, 23rd Mainichi newspaper poll published on Sunday show Mr. Abe's support slipping 10 points to 26% from a previous survey in June. That's quite a difference. In addition, 56% of the respondents, in fact, talking about him, thumbed down Mr. Abe's government, a sharp spike of 12 points once again. So a lot of numbers over there, whether you believe it or not these days about ratings. Mr. Shimatsu, Prime Minister Abe's supporting rate was really high for quite some time. So what kind of a shock do you think this would be for him when he read these numbers? And as a result, what does it mean for him when it comes to some of the most important political choices?
Well, now that only 1 in every 4 voters, believe his credibility, and more than that, his character, he's in deep trouble. He's had this 2020 plan to not only sponsor the Olympics in Tokyo, but to revise the Constitution, to remove the peace clauses. And so this Kake affair really sinks him like a torpedo. Now, what you have to understand, why just a veterinary school, an animal studies school? You have to understand that in the animal lab, you can do studies of contagious diseases, highly dangerous ones like SARS coronavirus, avian influenza, MERS, the camel virus, Ebola, and all you need is a level 3 lab. Now, if you did this at a hospital or medical school, you would need a level 4 lab. That would be the highest level security lab under the Biological Weapons Treaty. Okay, you have to report to CDC, World Health Organization, have inspectors come. So they were trying to put this in a very remote location, a highly dangerous lab, and this, I think a lot of his supporters start to realize the accusations against Mr. Abe about being a warmonger, his sitting in a plane that was marked number 731, and I'm a resident of, I'm from Kobe, Japan, Kobe, Okayama, where this school is from, and Shikoku, Ehime. They're part of what we call the research triangle of all the veterans of Unit 731 came back and became microbiology professors. They all worked there in schools there, Kobe University, Okayama University, Ehime, and Toshima University. So this is, people are starting to realize what this man is really about.
You can see that our panelist, Mr. Shimatsu, has some different views about exactly what happened. But Mr. Yang, here is the thing. The Abe administration, from the very beginning, you can see very clearly their political agenda.
Yeah.
It's about the revision of the Constitution. It's about having bigger role for Japan, both regionally and also internationally.
Yeah.
And of course, this would have an impact on its neighbors, China included, South Korea as well, some of the other Southeast Asian nations too.
Yeah.
So what will this latest personal political scandal, possibly still boiling in the near future, mean for Mr. Abe's political agenda? Will let him speed up or slow down?
Well, absolutely, he will input greater efforts for his planned political goals, rather than you say slow down or even cancel. The more severe pressures the more efforts for Abe to improve, to push forward his political schedule. But the problem is the current crisis or scandal pressures have greatly damaged his political base. That is his supporter pillar for bringing about what he wants in the political scandal. So the current crisis actually make the societies of Japan more divided. That means it's more and more difficult for him to get the majority to support a series of his goals, like revision of the constitution, like further revising the security-related legislation, and other goals. So in short, he will make more efforts for his goal, but he will face more obstacles and pressures, and more difficult to bring about what he wants.
Right. But when you think about Prime Minister Abe, Mr. Shimatsu, there is a lack of so-called center-left in the Japanese political landscape for now. There's also a lack of rising political leadership within Mr. Abe's own party, because right now he's the party head. So if it remains what it is today, he's still likely to be the prime minister for the future years to come. So is this going to be only storm in his teacup? Or actually this storm is going to have some real, serious implications?
Well, this Sendai election in Miyagi province, which is sort of in that Fukushima area, the zone, okay? This was really a victory by a coalition of the Democrat Party, which ruled before Abe came in, and also the Social Democrat, the Socialist Party, supported by the Japan Communist Party. So this was the really first great coalition gathering and in a very sensitive area. So it's indicative. And of course, Tokyo, he lost by a landslide. So I think this is really indicative of a real trend forming up, that the opposition has finally put the divisiveness, the confusion, the disorganization of the past behind it, and is starting to ride a popular crest now that's growing. I think times are changing finally.
Times are changing finally. To what speed? Is it really going to change the political landscape when it comes to election politics? Mr. Yang, what's your judgment? Mr. Yang, what's your judgment?
Well, I think he will be able to complete his term even till to 2020, but it's difficult for him to bring about his goal of revising the constitution that needs an extreme majority.
But Mr. Yang, here's something. One of the things why he's getting this political base, there's a hardcore of supporters for him, for Mr. Abe, that is trying to change the constitution, try to change the status of Japan for the future in the region, worldwide, try to look at the history in a very different lens. So if he is not going to do that, is he going to still have the hardcore supporter of his party? And is he going to last as a result of this?
Well, let me put it this way. The current rising opposition forces really include those who oppose Abe's plan to revise the constitution. Say, if without the scandal, those people remain opposing his plan. But if he drop off the revision of the constitution, those people will not oppose, but the scandal pressures will also make problems and troubles for him. So basically, he has been in trouble by varied reasons. Only pick out one of the reasons cannot reduce or remove the pressures he is facing.
Right.
So basically, he can insist on the completion of his term, but he can. I'm afraid he cannot bring about all the political goals, including the security ambitions and a constitution.
That is, of course, at the central level. But what about on localities? Mr. Shimatsu, you know this better than I do, and probably anybody else when you were covering the Japanese politics. Locally, it is also a war, political war, boiling over there. How about locally? Is his party really having a control? What about some of the rising stars of the opposition? Are they really going to have some say for the political landscape?
We're seeing a lot more women get into politics since the Tokyo elections.
That's true.
A woman won the Sendai election. So I think that's a huge change, that we're seeing more activism among women. The other problem for Abe is that he supported the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So a lot of the farm vote now is starting to defect away from the Liberal Democrats. And I think the final, he only has, the Liberal Democrats only have 30% of the electorate. He's in there because of apathy. What's changed in that 30%, however, is that a lot of those people aren't so much ideologically rightist or conservatives. They're people who support utility industry, a strong basic economy, and Abenomics has not worked out for them. These are people with large, holdings and shares in the stock market. They're very disappointed. The Japanese economy has not turned around the way he promised. So he's getting erosion in that 30%, along with the regrouping of the 60% who don't like him.
Interesting analysis. At the same time, Mr. Shimazu, since you talk about the TPP, you could see Japan's international vision. I mean, we earlier talked about revision of the constitution, having bigger power for its military worldwide, and now we're talking about economic as well. TPP, withdrawal of the United States. It's going to be a very different picture, even though Japan wants to support a renegotiation of that, even without the United States. You also see Japan trying to play so-called bigger role in international politics, whether it's in the UN, or it's about development aid, or it's about developing regional power relationship with some of the other countries like India, like Russia, like playing bigger role in Africa. How do you categorize the nature of Japan's search for a different image and a different status?
Well, these are all, we're talking about a wish list here. If Japan was like it was back in the 1960s and making a strong comeback, I think the real problem is Abe's core issue has always been the security climate in Northeast Asia. The problems Japan has had strategically with China, with North Korea, and to a lesser extent, but still there, with Russia. And he hasn't solved those problems. And now that the relationships between, North Korea and the United States is not going well, I think the electorate's very, very worried that he hasn't really asserted Japan's strength in any way. There's a lot of opposition from China, from Korea, and now from Russia. And so he has basically tended to push other countries away rather than bring them into any kind of cooperation for Japan. And I think a lot of people in Japan are very, very worried. He's a warmonger, but he's not going to be able to handle anything like a war in the region.
Mr. Yang, the wish list is an interesting phrase mentioned by Mr. Shimazu.
Yep.
That is a long wish list. But at this point, do you see any of the wish list likely to be achieved together with the domestic issues, such as Abenomics? It is the economy stupid, as they always say, when it comes to what is really supporting the political fights when it comes to elections. Mr. Yang.
Well, that's a really interesting question. But if you look at the whole items of the wish list, it's hard to find any of the item that can be satisfied to bring about. Simply because economically, Japan economy has been facing structural problems, while the Abe economics cannot address the structural problems only by increasing the monetary inputs, by financial policies, and some others. They cannot address the structural problems. So in security arena, his plan has divided the society, and also, if you look at the past few years, Japan's security environment, because of the adverse relationship with China, with North Korea, with Russia, so the security environment for Japan is going worse rather than better than before. So shortly, I could say only one of the items can achieve a limited progress, say TPP. But without the United States, the volume of GDP by TPP has been shrunk by 60%. So TPP will be there, but the significance of TPP has been totally different. than before.
Mr. Shimatsu, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think the professor is right on every one of those points. Very observant. Yeah, the situation is that he doesn't have a lot to show for his effort. There's other crises. These missing notes from the troop assignment in South Sudan. We have that looks like another scandal in brewing because the Constitution forbids, for example, participation in military conflicts outside, immediate defense purposes. So his problems are starting to pile up, and he has very, very little to show positive. And I agree with the professor. His monetary policy has been a failure, and even Mr. Kuroda, the head of the Bank of Japan, admits he's not going to reach his 2% inflation mark. So,
but Mr.
This is terrible for Abe.
But Mr. Shimatsu, just to be fair here, I mean, as a Japanese citizen yourself, many would argue, what is wrong with Japan playing a bigger role, both regionally and also internationally? What is wrong with Japan wanting to shouldering more responsibilities, whether for peacekeeping or for in the role in the United Nations? What is wrong with Japan to have more development aid for elsewhere in the world, for the developing world? How do you see the part of global responsibility vis-a-vis a political desire to be Japan, which in fact, in a way that is resembling what it was, when it's running up and during the war? What is the edge that we are talking about here?
Okay, if we can compare why China right now is so successful, is that it had when it had a trade balance, and it still does, it built an investment fund for infrastructure, as we see now along the One Belt, one road policy all over, in fact, all over the world, not just there. Whereas Japan, when we had our trade balance, we put all our money into an asset bubble, into a real estate property bubble, mainly focused in Tokyo. And when the bubble blew, we lost all our savings. So Japan had this enormous opportunity from the 1960s, had a tremendous run of prosperity and growth. And when we finally got all the money together, we dumped it all into real estate at home, and it overinflated and the bubble broke. And we're still suffering from that. And as a result, Japan will not be a world power in the foreseeable future. Whereas China did properly invest it into a trust fund, which is of benefit to countries all around the world, and also very good for China's construction economy.
But Mr. Yang, you see Japan also play an important role in the Asia Development Bank, for example. That is a development aid project also as well, even today. So what do you think, from China's perspective, Japan is going, where Japan is going, and how is China likely to work with Japan for a positive future for everyone?
Well, theoretically, it would be great if Japan can play a greater role in Asia and in the global arena economically, including the political arena. However, by what approach and what path? Now, Japan, for example, in economic, you mentioned the ADB, Asian Development Bank. And we have set up AIIB that have been widely welcomed by the international community, that play a very important role for infrastructure construction. But Japan opened a totally different way, non-cooperative way with the majority of the international community. They want to open a unique way, led by themselves.
Okay.
So basically, they are conducting the Japanese style increasing role programs. So I think without the cooperation within the international community, their own way for the increasing their own role cannot be successful.
We'll see what's going to happen. Thank you so much, Yang Xiyu, Yoichi Shimatsu. Really appreciate it. You're watching World Insight with Tianwei. Still to come on our program, I speak to Melinda Gates about the giving pledge by the world's billionaires, but we also discuss the best ways to reach gender equity. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight with Tianwei, coming to you live Monday to Friday on CGTN. We live in a world of complexity, a world facing war and peace. While some thrive, others struggle to survive. We also live in an age where both technology and society are being revolutionized. These changes present us with new challenges and solutions. How the players in our society can step forward and take responsibility has become a widely discussed topic. Not only do governments and corporations have a role to play, but individuals have picked up the baton by initiating platforms to share their wealth and to give back to society.
Challenges to mankind have increased. The world's accelerating population growth has contributed to wars where people compete for fewer resources. Poverty, increased refugees, and global health have incurred billions of dollars on the global community. From nations ravaged by war and poverty, there is a humble call for humanitarian assistance. A call that has been heeded by philanthropists who have directed billions of funds to improve the livelihood of people across the world. The Giving Pledge initiative by Melinda and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett exemplifies this action.
For Melinda and Bill Gates, their mission is even much more than just the Giving Pledge, which calls upon the wealthiest in the world to contribute, but also devoting their time, efforts, wealth, and passion to believe that all lives have equal value. To achieve that, they have been working on enhancing health care and reducing extreme poverty worldwide. In an exclusive interview with our program, her very first in China, Melinda Gates, co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, told me that she and Bill have learned a lot while working in partnerships in philanthropic causes all over the world.
Bill and I think of it as a learning journey. We are always constantly learning in the fields that we're working in. So whether it's learning about the latest science or learning about the latest behavior change, how to get people to take up some of these things. But we see philanthropy as a catalytic wedge. You have to always remember what philanthropy's role is, and that is all philanthropy can do is take risks where a government can't take a risk or won't take a risk. And we can do pilots, we can take new scientific innovations. Bill and I are big believers in innovation, but then it always takes civil society and government to scale that up. So every single thing we do in philanthropy is in partnership with somebody else, whether it's business, civil society, or government, and that will always be the case.
But identify that partnership, who to work with, on what condition, what is the bottom line, and what if there has to be a compromise, to what extent the compromise will be made. All these are the choices you have to make every day on every project.
Definitely, but I think if you have a long-term vision in a field, so in malaria, for instance, our vision is that we will eradicate malaria eventually from the planet. And if you know that's your goal and you sign up partners who have the same belief you do, then as you make the milestones along the way, yes, there are sometimes compromises, but it's always on the vision towards that goal. And quite often they're not compromises, it's that you learn something and you decide you have to tack in a different direction, right? It's like sailing. If you're sailing in one direction, you have to tack a lot till you eventually get to where you want to go.
What is the latest experience of that?
Well, I would say, polio. We are trying to eradicate polio from the planet, and we're very, very close. There have only been, I believe, 7 cases of wild polio this year, compared to 19 last year. And if you go back, several decades, it was thousands of cases. But every time something happens and we get a new outbreak, we have to go in and vaccinate all in that area. So if you'd asked us, 10 years ago, did we think there would be wild polio back in Syria, we would have said no. But because of the civil unrest there is again. And so you learn, though, how to go into those places, how to vaccinate around those cases, and then do surveillance.
But was that frustrating? I mean, because you have done already almost there, and then something happened, you have to go back again, redo it, and sometimes under very different light, in very different way. Frustrating?
Well, I would say Frustrating, more disappointing is probably the right word, and disappointing for the people who live there, right? The fact that the vaccination, the basic vaccinations that you do for kids haven't been kept up because of the war. If the basic vaccines had been kept up, you wouldn't see wild polio. So more disappointment and a sadness for the people that are experiencing that, right?
How would you calm yourself down? I mean, and your staff as well, because they've been working for years in order to achieve a goal, but all of a sudden you have to deal with crises like that again.
But that's part of the work. I mean, I think you have to have some expectation that, as Warren says, you know, we're working in some of the toughest places in the world, and we're working on some of the problems that humanity has left behind. And they've left them behind because they are some of the hardest problems. And yet, so we know that what we're trying to do, you have to have a long-term vision for it and know that you're going to get there. And again, you just tack against those specific issues and make sure you stay focused on the goal.
There are different styles of governance in different countries, different business styles as well. So once you want to create a partnership, you have to understand it, have both empathy and cooperative spirits.
Absolutely.
So to what extent the partnership represent you? To what extent you are willing to sacrifice or compromise for the partnership?
Well, I think it's always about, it always comes down to what our values are. We are living our values out as a couple through our foundation. And so the partners that we work with have the same shared goals we have. So if it's vaccinating children so that they don't die, that is a shared partnership and relationship. And so then what you have to do is understand the partners that you pick. What are their leadership styles? How do you make sure they stay motivated? What's their role? What's our role? Make sure we're clear about that. And then, quite frankly, the most important thing is to make sure that anywhere you're going in with a new innovation or new technology is that families understand it and that they're willing to take it up. We can have the greatest new vaccine for something, but if a mom won't allow you to give that shot to her child or those drops in the mouth, it's never going anywhere.
Cultural differences.
Yes, so you have to really work in the right cultural, you have to understand the culture and work with NGOs who really understand the people there and respect that culture.
What is likely to be the roles of governments or philanthropic organizations like yours, the Gates Foundation, and some of the other players, the business community? In your opinion, what's their role in the future at least?
Well, I can tell you what their role is now and I think what it'll be in the future. So philanthropy, again, is a tiny piece. If you look in the U.S., it's about 2% of our entire budget is philanthropy. So, but it's philanthropy in partnership with business and in partnership with government. So a perfect example are vaccines. It's the pharmaceutical companies that create the vaccines, and we work in partnership with them to try and help them understand that there will be a market for the vaccine, even for an infectious disease that we might not have in the United States or Europe. So we bring them in, we make sure they can still make a profit on the vaccine, and then we bring government in to help scale up vaccines and to really purchase them at scale.
But here, of course, you are dealing with commercial interests, you are dealing with different governments, you are also dealing with cultural differences. A lot of things, IPR issues as well, all of them at the same time. So when you are trying to pick up a partnership or a project, what is the most important priorities for you?
I think the most important priorities for us are understanding what that partner's priorities are and do those match ours. So when we're working with a government, so for instance the government of Ethiopia, we're really matching their priorities. We have a shared goal, which is they want to reduce maternal deaths, they want to reduce infant deaths. And so we are working and coming into their set of goals for their country and saying, these are the innovations we know about, these are the ones we're working on, these are the ones other countries have been using, here are ways to scale them up inside of your country. But if the government doesn't want to do that work, it ultimately isn't going to happen. It would fail because they are the ones, they have to have the plan and the decision to scale it up for all the people in their country.
Partnership. For Melinda Gates, the Gates Foundation that she and her husband, Bill Gates, have nurtured is only part of her passion. As a professional woman herself, she is also eager to work for gender equity. In recent years, she has been embarking on a journey to find solutions toward that issue. In the interview, she also shared her ideas about partnership between men and women at home and in the world. Talking about partnership, Melinda, you have another very important partnership. That is the partnership between you and Bill. Earlier I joked with you about whenever your name is mentioned, Bill immediately very relaxed and smiling on his face. But you know, it's complicated. It's work, life, so many different layers. Complicated to deal with, one would say. And that is the most important partnership you have in your life.
Absolutely.
How does that work?
Well, again, you know, Bill and I, we're both ambitious. We both have a vision for where we want to go in the future. And we've learned to work things out. And if you disagree on something, I don't think any couple in the world, right? You need to have some healthy tension in a relationship. And we don't agree on every single business thing. But what we do is we agree to disagree in private. And we work that out in private. And then we show up at the foundation. It's a completely unified voice and unified message. And that works well for the whole organization. So they're not wondering, well, does Bill want this and Melinda wants that? That just doesn't work.
What is the most important remedy for any, you know, differences resolution?
I think really listening to the other person's point of view and a mutual respect. And Bill and I always affirm the relationship first. The most important thing is our relationship. So if we have a business disagreement, but we affirm the relationship first, we're going to find our way through the business disagreement.
Beautifully said. I don't want to ask you something about gender equity as well. You are a very big advocate for that. Melinda, you were talking about spending 2 years to listen around to see why there's a gap of the number of people, men and women, in the science and technological world. So far, what have you discovered?
Well, I think that in so many places, women, for whatever reason, aren't going into the sciences. And I can speak specifically about the United States, which is the time I was in school in the late 1980s. Both computer science degrees and law and medicine were on their way up for women. And today, law and medicine in the United States it's about at parity in terms of girls and boys graduating with degrees. But computer science went up, and then it went crashing down. And so we're learning about all the reasons that is, and I think there are loss points both in elementary school, high school, college, and then even in the tech sector. A lot of women don't feel very welcomed in the tech sector, or they don't see role models. A woman will say, I don't look like a guy in a hoodie, and so they don't know if they can be successful. And so I think we need to work on each of those loss points and give girls role models and say, you can be fantastic in innovation, in technology, and in science. We know that girls can be great at that stuff.
What is the most important thing, role model or general societal understanding and realization of the gender equity that we need to have?
Both.
Just as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. It's not an either or. We both have to respect that women can do this, and we need to role model for them other women who are already doing it. And you do those two things, we're going to go a long way.
Yeah. Last time when Bill was here in China, he made a speech talk about China is this country on its way up, while at the same time has this forever quest for excellence. You came back to China since last time, 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. What have you discovered? What is this going on here in this country?
Well, I think there's in a certain sense, a sense of we can do it. And
you mean the can-do spirit?
A can-do spirit, and a very forward-looking spirit of, wow, we're on our way somewhere, we're on our way up. And when you see the number of people that have been lifted out of poverty, 700 million, I mean, that's just phenomenal, and you can feel it. You're in a place like Beijing, and everything's bustling and growing. And yes, there are some growing pains, right? But that's part of growing. I mean, China's growing in a way that is also looking outward towards the world. When Bill and I show up at places like the United Nations or the World Health Organization, China's on all of those stages and platforms for very good reason, because China has so much to bring and to teach the world, and I think that's really exciting.
But the world is changing so fast, Melinda, as you may know. In your country, there's politics. In other countries, you also see the international governance changes. So how much change are we really experiencing right now? What is your judgment?
Yes, we're seeing that the world is getting better for people. I mean,
really?
Yes, really.
Really?
So the headlines, if you pick up the newspaper every day, you might think, oh, that's not the case. But if you look at all the statistics, you look at childhood deaths, you look at people lifting out of poverty, you look at violence numbers, you look at maternal deaths, all of those statistics are getting better. And when I travel to Africa countries today, countries that I've been traveling to now for over a decade, you see this sense of this entrepreneurial spirit. You see more businesses, you see more people with cell phones, you see people saving money on their cell phones. I mean, just think of the digital revolution that's happened in China that's allowed people to not only exchange money, but to save money. You can save a few yuan a day. Boy, you can go to the market and buy things, you can educate your kids. And if a woman can save money, when a woman has access to financial services, it empowers her. And I don't care where she is in the world, India, China, the United States, it makes a huge difference. And so the world is absolutely getting better for people.
So you are still an optimist?
Yes. It's getting better. I wish it was getting better a little faster, but it's absolutely getting better. So impatient optimist.
Okay. That is Melinda Gates. And she is talking about her habit of being into an impatient optimist. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, try to find us World Insight CGTN in your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo as well. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again tomorrow for insights across China and around the world. Good night.